you kind of understand that a little bit more from why I have that opinion. And so after I'd gotten out of jail, I had this decision that I needed to make, and that decision, out of jail in 2012, or 2011, my little girl came in 2012. And so what ended up happening is that after I got out of jail, I had this huge decision to make. And I lived with my mom for a little while, and then I lived in a shelter, and I was going through this program to practically continue on my relationship with trying to understand more about whom God was in this profound encounter that I had with God while I was in jail. Now, a lot of people, funny enough, some of them probably will watch this, maybe not eventually, maybe, I have no idea. If they do, then they'll definitely understand that a lot of people realistically have this phrase in jail that you go to jail and you find Jesus, and then when you get out, you kind of don't find Jesus anymore. He's lost. And so in a lot of ways, I kind of had an experience like that, but I didn't really find Jesus through like the Bible. I found God through like a real relationship that really kind of shook me out of this time that I was in. And I ultimately kind of define it as like a baptism of the Holy Spirit, as they call it, or baptism. Old school Christians will call it like a baptism of the fire. But I realistically kind of philosophize and theorize it today more as like a complete filling of this water right here, of chi. Like if this is me, then all of this in here legitimately was filled with 100% complete chi, and that changed my whole life and cleaned everything and made me a better human being in a sense like that. A much better human being. And so when I got out of jail, I started going to college not too long after that, and I was very focused at becoming a prosecutor, and my little girl's mother was still trying to develop this early childhood development, potentially moving into social work and some of these other areas. And so the way that I had realistically looked at everything, I found it as, I would be the prosecutor or the public defender, and she would be the social worker, and we would work together as friends to help build and repair and heal young people and older people's lives. Because growing up as a kid, I was given away. I was an orphan. By the time I was 6 years old, I had no family. I had nothing at all. My parents had legitimately signed me away to the government. I had gotten hit by a car, which drew the Children's Services here in Columbus, Ohio, into my life. They took me. And then eventually my parents just stopped coming around, and they gave my rights away, and they let me go. And so I moved from foster home to foster home, and the relationships that I could have had with my father and my mother, which I don't really complain about it now because I found them years later, and they turned out to be the same human beings they were when I was a child. So I didn't really miss out on anything. However, I had this strong belief of structure, discipline, rules, regulations, justice that had been installed in me growing up after and thereafter from making my own mistakes, but then at the same time, this Holy Spirit and this chi being poured out into my life. And that transition ultimately led me to really want to, one, help rehabilitate these fathers who are struggling to be good fathers, but at the same time, admonish them with the law so that they would become better human beings. Well, at the same time, my little girl's mother was becoming a social worker at that point in early childhood development. At least that was what she had been speaking about and we had talked about to some extent. And so to me, the way that I looked at this divide is that together in this black and white friendship that we were building when I got out of jail, realistically would have been better than what we have created, because now both of us have this toxic relationship, and I'm 100% sure, as I said in one of my other videos, if I called her, she would hang up. She doesn't respond, she doesn't do anything. She hates my guts. The last time I heard from her, she was like, I need you to sign all of your rights over and vamonos, you need to leave. And I was like, no way, I'm not going to do it. My father did that to me. My parents did that to me. If there's one thing that I'm not going to do, although I've made some of the same mistakes as my parents, it's sign my own kid away. I might remove myself from her life so that she can have a good and better life. And I think that to a lot of extents, that's not a horrible thing to do, depending on the relationship. Sometimes it's just better, Sometimes it's just better to not put your child through that, And a lot of parents and people like me would be like, growing up as a kid, you're like, man, I really wanted to have my mom and my dad, but you don't really understand as to how good it was that your mom and dad probably weren't together and that your dad might not have been around. Because I'll tell you something right now, man. My little girl's mother, we go at it sometimes, and when we went at it, I would sit there at the top of the stairs and realistically be like, damn, my little girl is going to be raised in this kind of relationship, and I'm used to this. And there are times where it was like my little girl's mother would like stand in front of me and not let me take these nice little walks I take to cool down and keep me from raging. And I was like, damn, I'm completely, how you doing? Completely 100% afraid of what I could potentially do if she keeps blocking me. And in a lot of ways, not everybody is realistically 100% capable of working through stuff like that. And so that's why I strongly, in this foundation, believe that a black and white, Barack Obama, Biden kind of presidency, rather than a blending of America together at this point. It doesn't mean in the future that's not possible. I just think that right now in our country, the best thing that we can do is start building these relationships. And so in this book that I'm writing, one of the many things that I have been talking about was